Hurry, we gotta talk shit about Oracle on this app before they own it. Birmingham City Council's $200 million Oracle implementation. We must talk about it. Now, this case study is still ongoing, so it'll be interesting to see what actually happens. This is an Oracle implementation in which they're replacing their SAP system. Those crazy Brits. So they had this Frankenstein melted together, highly customized SAP environment. It was becoming outdated, hard to support. They implemented it in 1999, 25 plus years old. SAP comes out and says, hey, you know what? We're pulling support for ECC. You need to be on S4HANA by 2025. Now, don't come for me for the dates because they just move it so that they can get more money from you. Now it's 2027, whatever. They're pulling support. So the council, as they should, said, let's take a look at this decision. We can either rip out SAP and replace it with more of an out-of-box software that's easier to manage, or we can move to S4HANA. Well, I don't know who they had involved in this decision. They certainly didn't ask me, big mistake. But it is pretty well known that if you're going to completely take out an SAP environment and replace it with Oracle, it's going to be messy as hell, especially as an operation as complex of the Birmingham City Council, which is the largest local authority by population in Europe with an annual revenue budget of over $3 billion. In 2018, when they're making this decision, they're like, you know what? We're going to scrap this messy SAP system and go with an out-of-the-box, side-eye, version of Oracle Fusion to help us modernize. Like really any SAP environment, once they looked at that option of out of the box, they realized they were going to have to revert to a lot of Oracle's legacy software because of the increased perplexity and complexity of these types of different functionalities, which would undermine their entire goal. As you can imagine, there was a huge lack of expertise. You had an SAP team and all of a sudden you're like, if you did SAP, you can do Oracle. That's being like, you can speak Spanish, then you can definitely speak Portuguese. Not so much. Maybe they're similar, but not really. Because of this lack of in-house competencies, they obviously had to bring in a lot of external vendors that they relied heavily upon. Red flag. They weren't savvy enough on the system to act as intelligent customers or partners because they didn't have that level of understanding. That really affected and grew the risk of the project to outsource that project management, expertise, all of those different things. So governance was a huge issue for them. This happens a lot, but often with executives for the private sector that's like, here, go modernize. I brought you a system. The internal team's like, wait, what? And that's even worse in the public sector because the council makes this decision and then all of a sudden they're in charge with modernizing. Modernizing what though? What exactly are you looking at? And that's the issue here. There were so many shifting priorities and not one group solely in charge that it made it impossible for anyone to really march in the same direction as a unified aligned front, which we all know are so important in these transformation projects. This chaos led to, understandably so, a ton of insecurity and turnover on the IT team. And if you've been involved in a project this magnitude before, you know that getting a new PM is almost as hard as starting completely over. Each PM has their own different process, their own different language. It's completely disruptive to have a new CIO, a new IT executive, and a new project manager involved in these types of projects. Their original go live target was 2020 to 2021. They missed that completely, eventually went live in April of 2022. However, which again, we see all the time, the system was not complete. It was more of just appease the powers that be. They're like, you need to go live with this. Like, what are you doing? All of these middle managers over here are like, hey, it's not ready. It's not working. And, the council members are like, it needs to go live because this is embarrassing, you guys, which leads to going live with a system that doesn't work, which is worse. The biggest area of business disruptive was their core financial system. No big deal. There were posting errors, incomplete or missing completely financial data. These all led to a massive manual overhaul, which ultimately led to significant delays. For example, they were unable to close 2 accounts for 2 fiscal years. They accumulated 12.5 million euros in bad debt. That is crazy. This massive project failure was a significant reason in which the council declared bankruptcy in 2023. Finally, they're calling in people to come help them fix it. And they're like, hey man, this is a dumpster fire. These auditors noted that they might be without an entire financial system. It's not funny, until 2026. So almost 10 years later, they're still not operational. Total project costs completely skyrocketed from the original budgeted number of 40 million to 170 million by 2025. Is estimated to be over 200 million in losses by 2026. This is to fund those manual workarounds, keep those legacy systems limping along while they try and figure out what to do next. So as of now, because again, this is still ongoing, they plan to move forward with making Oracle work and fixing their terrible financial management system from their botched go live. New target go live is April 2026. If it were me, I would just stay away from April, my friend. But here we are. The biggest lessons that we can really take away from this is ensuring that you're not giving the keys away to any vendor, lacking that ownership and governance. You need to make sure that you understand what's going on, especially if you're switching from such a huge environment change like SAP to Oracle. We're getting a little nuts. The public sector always requires more due diligence and risk management because you need to understand all of the different components as this is your job to serve the public. Underestimating these requirements for them as far as those external audits and compliance was absolutely disastrous. And I would say most importantly, that always in the green reporting that the council was requiring of them, pushing them to go live with an incomplete system just to say they went live was really the nail in the coffin. If your middle management team cannot go to senior leadership and say, hey, there's a critical problem with this, then you might as well just walk up to the roof and throw your money off of it because it's never going to work. You might be able to implement something that is really shitty and doesn't work just to say you implemented something, but the point was to modernize. They did quite the opposite of that while spending millions and millions of European citizens' money. So as always, it doesn't matter what I say or what happens to other companies. It matters what we learn from them as a community that is dedicated to bringing more transparency to these secret big software failures. So definitely let me know what your feedback is in the comments or anywhere that you feel like we could learn from this as a community, because that's how we overcome being lied to by the SaaS mafia.